Hello, my name is Marcus and this is going to be organic. So now we're back here in After Effects and all we have is this cheesy text doing nothing. So let's start by pre-composing this into its own composition. So layer, pre-compose and call it text. Bam, ding dong. Let's go into the text composition here. Now we want each individual letter to be split up so that we can animate it and rotate it. You can do this in a couple of ways. You can either do it through the text animation tools. You can split it up into 3D text, but I like to have more control over it. So instead I'm going to use a free script that you can get through the newsletter. You can just subscribe to it and in the welcome mail you get the access to the scripts. Then just select the text, go up into File, and Run Script. And you choose Split Text into Layers. Bam! Now they're split into layers. Now they do get offset a bit, but that's a quick fix. So let's just activate the previous text, select all these layers, press P for position, and just move them back into place. Something along these lines. We just quickly adjust this. And there you go. Now I want to be able to animate these letters in 3D space, and to do that I'm just going to select all these layers and I'm going to click on the little square box here and bam, they are now 3D. I'm going to press P and Shift R to bring up the position and the rotation. Now the anchor point is down here at the bottom. I do not want that, so instead I'm going to hold Control down and double click on the pan behind tool. And bam, now it's in the middle. That's what we want. So over here at second 7, I'm going to keyframe position and C rotation. And then we're going to go to the very beginning here and I'm just going to randomly shove these into space and rotate them a bit, something like this. Just make it a little bit offset, some of them quite far back, something like this. Just play around with this stuff. So something along these lines. Now we have these letters coming forth and that's awesome. Now we want them to slowly land into place. I'm just going to select all the position keyframes first. There we go. Something like this. And I'm going to press Control Shift K to bring up the keyframe velocity. So I'm going to say that when they land here, I want them to have speed 0 and I want them to have 100% influence so that they slowly drift into place, as you can see here. I'm going to do the exact same thing for rotation. Shift, Shift, and bam, bam, bam. Shift, select all these keyframes. Control Shift K, and once again, if I could actually click 0 and 100. Now you can even see in the animation graph here where you can see the keyframes, you can see how it slowly drifts into place. That's what we want. You can even make these sharp at the beginning if you want to make sure that it's just so that they start fast and land slow. Something like this. There we go. Select all the keyframes and bam. Go back here. Now we want them to blur the further away from us they are. So we're going to do this by a little cool expression. So we're going to add an effect called Fast Blur. Bam. Double click on that bad boy. There. So we're going to alt click on Blur Radius. So we bring up this expression here. Now we're going to link to the C position of the same layer. And now we're going to multiply it by a very low value so that it doesn't blur as much. So multiply sign and then 0.005. Something like this. Now we can see how much. This is still clearly not enough. So let's take it all the way down to 1 maybe. Too little. And 2. Maybe something like that. There we go. So I'm just going to take this effect, Control C for copy, and I'm going to select all the other text layers and bam, paste. And now you can see the closer they come, the less they blur, which is quite cool. So now we got the text set up here. So let's go back here into our main comp. We want this to have like some organicness to it and we want it to blur and distort. So let's add a turbulent displacement. Turbulence. There we go. Double click on that bad boy. We're going to have it quite high, amount 150, maybe 70. That's probably not nearly enough. So we want it to be actually quite small, maybe less actually. Something like this, something quite subtle. We just wanted to have like this nice little life to it, maybe even 6. And now we're going to alt click on Offset Turbulence because we want it to animate over time. So I'm going to write A equals 100 and then semicolon. There you go. And now we're going to write a square bracket because we have 2 dimension in this array, X and Y, so we need a square bracket. I'm going to write time times A, and the exact same thing, just copy paste this if you want to make it easier on your life. There you go. Now you can see over time it's just going to animate down into the right, which is quite cool. And we're also going to add some evolution to this. So exact same thing. I'll click time times 100. There you go. So now we're going to start adding some grossness around this entire thing and some background. So let's start with the background here. So layer, new, solid. And this will become relevant later on. So let's just call it color, because this is going to be the dominant color in the entire scene. And we actually want it to be exactly this color I've selected here, only 10% hue, because that way it's going to add this really nice orange and yellow color later on. So okay and okay. Just place it below the text. Now the text, we want it to be completely black as well. So let's go over here and write tint, not tuna. We don't need a tuna, tint. Double click and make it completely black. We can even place this before the turbulent displays just to make it a little cleaner. So now let's start making the frames that are gonna dissolve as we get closer to this thing. So first of all, let's make a new layer, new, solid. And let's just call this frame, not frame. I really gotta get better at writing stuff. Let's just make this completely black. Okay. I'm gonna pre-compose this immediately. So Control-Shift-C, there you go. And we can just call it frame, and I'm gonna call it frame A because we might make more frames in the future. So frame A, there you go. And in we go. So this is gonna have 3 specific layers. So first of all, we're gonna have the fractal noise. And double click on that little sucker. And we're gonna have this be a smeary, and we're gonna invert it. There we go. We're gonna have it be less complex because we're gonna scale it up quite a smidge. Something like Dias. Yeah, something like this. So let's go over into second 7. Let's just play around with the contrast here. Maybe something like this. And then keyframe the brightness. And then go over way into the beginning here and just increase the brightness until it's completely white. Now we also want to animate this noise over time. So let's do the same thing as before. And I'll click on offset turbulence. A equals 40 this time, and square brackets because it's 2 dimensions, times A, and time times A. There we go. So we have this nice slow little movement here. Exact same thing with evolution. So time times 40. There we go. So we just have this nice thing moving on. Now we wanted to actually have a hole in the middle, so to speak. So we're gonna actually make a new solid, Control Y, and we're gonna call this hole. There we go. And we're gonna make this large mask that appears in the middle. So go over into mask and select the ellipse tool. And if you double click, it's gonna make a mask that fills the entire frame. So let's go down to mask here, and I'm gonna press Control-Shift-H to bring up the mask GUI so I can see what I'm doing. Let's just feather this out quite a bit. And let's go over here into last keyframe and just make a keyframe on expansion. And here at the beginning, we want to decrease the expansion, something like this, so that it appears over time. Now this right now is way too uniform, so we're also going to apply a turbulent displacement. Bam. And this is going to be quite high, so let's say 150 and 70. So we get these nice distorted edges. And same thing as before, we can basically copy paste this expression, copy, offset turbulence, paste. And instead of 40, we're going to say 800. Same thing with evolution. I'll click time times 800. There we go. And once again, we actually need the edges to be completely white. So we're going to duplicate this and we're going to say whole white. Now we basically just got to invert this mask. So press M to bring up the mask. I'm going to say subtract. And we're going to go into we could either go into the layer and modify the solid settings, or just press Control-Shift-Y to bring up the solid settings again. And just make it completely white. There you go. So we get this nice thing that just opens up. Exciting news! I'm on the verge of finishing a new animation tool that allows you to quickly animate many layers at once with dynamic offsets and even randomness. Not only can you offset animation, but you can also loop them, make them exponential, and even offset effects. Join the creative journey and let's make animation magic together. Keep a lookout for Cheesy Echo. So first of all, we need to make this more blobby in its shape. Right now it's very, very soft. So we're going to apply an effect called Posturize. double click on that little naughty boy and set it to 2 so we get these nice edges here. So you can already see now it's starting to get like this nice blobbiness to it here. And then we're going to apply a unmult effect, because we need to be completely transparent in the middle. If you don't have unmult and it's completely free, I'll leave a link to it in the description. But if you don't want to use it, you can use the built-in unmult here called Alpha from Lightness Unmult. So you can also just use that. And now we're going to apply a tint because we want it to be completely black. And there we go. Bam, now it's a black edge, and a fast blur, there we go. And we're going to set this to 6, and we want it to repeat edges so that these red lines don't appear. There we go. So now we have the initial setup, and if you feel like there's not enough blobbiness or these tendrils don't extend well enough, we can always just go into the frame and change it. So for example, if we feel like this is not enough, we can just go into the frame here and we can increase the contrast, maybe increase the brightness here at the end, something like this, so we get more blobbiness. You can even also go into the mask of the hole here and decrease the feather or increase it, either way, something like this, until we get more blobbiness in the middle of the frame, which is quite nice. So next we want to add some more details in the background to really bring this thing to life. So I'm going to make a new layer, Control Y, which is the same as making a new solid up in layer. We're going to call this tendrils. Make it complete black. And wham-a-lama ding dong. Place it right above the color here. And let's apply a fractal noise. Bam! So now let's take it from basic to dynamic, and we're going to invert this so we start getting some nice, almost veiny stuff. We can take the complexity down to 4 maybe, so it's less detailed, and we can scale this up quite a smidge, something like this. Maybe increase the contrast and play around with this bad boy. Maybe even scale it a bit more so we get these nice details. And we also want to animate these tendrils, so I'm going to out-click on Offset Evolution and paste the expression from before and set it to 100. Maybe that's too much, maybe just 40. And the exact same thing with evolution, time times 40. There we go. So we want these to be transparent on top of the color, so I'm going to apply another unmult effect, double click. And we want them to be black actually, so we're going to write tint once again, double click on tint, and set them to completely black. And now we just need a curves so that we can change the alpha of this entire thing. So see, right now it's being clamped quite a bit, and that's probably because I changed the contrast. So instead we're going to set the contrast to 100 so that there's no clamping going on here. We can even increase the brightness, something quite dark. And now we're going to use the curves to control the contrast. So if you set it to alpha, let's just boost here and let's just bring this down so we can find like a sweet spot, something along these lines. We'll probably change this later on when we have a better idea of what's happening. So now let's add a soft gradient on the sides of this entire thing here. So we can basically just copy the whole from this here composition from inside our frame A. I'm going to paste this right above the color here. Now we want it to be inverted, so I'm going to press M for mask and go down into this bad boy and set it to subtract. And here at the end here, I'm going to click on the mask expansion to eliminate all the keyframes, so we just have it static. We have this nice soft static gradient. That's quite nice, and it's animating over time, which is also what I want. Now we want this entire thing to have sort of like a heartbeat effect, like dun 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 dun. We're going to do this with an adjustment layer. So new adjustment layer. We're going to call this heartbeat. There we go. We're going to place it right above the color here, and we're going to apply an exposure effect to it. So double click on that little thing. And to create this heartbeat effect, I'm going to animate the exposure. So let's click on that, and now let's click on U to bring up the keyframes. And let's start by setting this to -1. There we go. Let's go, let's say 8 frames forward. So if you hold shift down and press page down, it goes 10 frames forward. And I'm going to set this to 0,5. There you go. So it goes up half. And now 4 frames forward, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can set it to 0. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And once again, 0,5. And now we want to go quite a few frames forward so it has a slow fall off. So 1, 2, 3, so 30 frames approximately. And once again, -1. So see, now it's going to have this up and have a little bit of a break and up again and all the way down to -1. And we want this to loop over time. So first of all, I'm going to select all these keyframes and take them to the very beginning, something like this. And now to make them loop, we're just going to alt-click on exposure and write a cool little expression called loop out. So when it reaches the last keyframe, it's just going to start from the first keyframe over and over again endlessly. So if we select these 2 layers, you can see it's just going to continue making that loop, which is quite nice. So to really bring this thing to life and give it that nice color hue shift, we're going to select all these layers, Ctrl-Shift-C to pre-comp them, and we're going to write comped, as in this has now been comped. And see, this is where the cool aesthetic starts. So we're going to duplicate this layer and call it glow. And we're going to apply a fast blur to it. There we go, fast blur. So first one we're going to make quite low. So let's say like 10. And we're going to set it to screen. So every single time we duplicate this, we're going to get some nice orange hues in over the entire composition. We can duplicate it again, maybe set it to 50. Duplicate it again, maybe set it to 150, and at the very end, one more time, maybe 450. And maybe it's getting a little bit too blurred, so we can just go into some of the final ones. I press T for opacity. So to really bring this home and make it even sexier and really get these nice saturated colors, we need to make an adjustment layer. There we go, and I'm gonna call it CC for color correction. I'm gonna apply a good old-fashioned in-your-face, wait a minute, curves. And we're gonna make a very nice S-curve here. So look at this, look at these juicy red colors seeping through. So see, already now we're getting some really nice juiciness going on here, and you can always boost it as much as you want to get more color out of this, more contrast. If you want to give this even more detail, you can use another free script that you can get in my newsletter. So we're just going to select all these layers in the master composition here. I'm going to press Ctrl-Shift-C and call it master. There we go. Now we're going to run that extra script here. So scripts, run script file, and it's called fake DOF particle. So double click on that bad boy. And see, now it's going to ask you, okay, do you want it to base these particles on the alpha of the image or the luminance? And I want it to be based on luminance since I have no transparency. And we could have it anamorphic, but right now I don't really care. So I'm just going to press confirm. And see, now it makes a bunch of small particles based on the luminance of your image, and you can just hide this if you want. And even cooler, you have a bunch of settings to adjust this. So you can see maybe you don't want the area size to be as large. As you can see, they dissipate a bit out here in the edges. I'm gonna take it back to 80. Maybe you want the alpha boost to be higher, so set this up to 80 and the particles become more visible. So already now you can see you got some coolness going on here. You can even change like the evolution speed of them or the amounts. Just by taking down brightness, you can see there's fewer of them. So we get this nice, highly detailed micro look with these small particles just emerging based on the luminance of your image, which is quite cool. If you want to receive a mail whenever there are new templates, advanced templates, or tools, or presets, or courses, etc., then I would recommend joining the newsletter. You can find the link in the description. If you enjoy these type of text and logo animation tutorials, then I can definitely recommend the playlist shown here on the left. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'm looking forward to see what you guys can create with these type of effects. Have a wonderful day with some cheese.